I want to ask you something honest. When is the last time you sat in complete silence? No phone, no music, no podcast, no TV in the background. Just you and the quiet. If you cannot remember, this story is exactly for you.
In a busy city full of noise, there was one doctor who believed in quiet. His name was Dr. Elias. He had been practicing medicine for 20 years. He had prescribed thousands of things in those 20 years. Pills for anxiety, pills for insomnia, medication for pain. He was good at his job. His patients trusted him completely. But there was one prescription he gave that his colleagues had never seen before. Not a pill, not a procedure, not a referral. 1 hour of silence. Every single day. No phone, no music, no television, no conversation. Just the patient, alone, in complete quiet. He had been giving this prescription for 15 years. And in those 15 years, it had never once failed.
When his colleagues first heard about this, they laughed. Not cruelly. Just the way doctors laugh at things that fall outside what they were taught. One colleague said, "Elias, you cannot prescribe silence. Silence is not medicine." Elias said, "Everything that heals is medicine." His patients were harder to convince than his colleagues. The first thing most of them said was, "1 hour? I do not have 1 hour." Elias would nod. Then he would say, "You have exactly 1 hour. You are spending it on things that are making you worse." The second thing most patients said was, "I have tried sitting quietly. It makes me anxious." Elias would say, "Yes, it will. For the first week. The anxiety you feel in silence is not caused by the silence. It was already there. The noise was simply covering it up." The third thing patients said was, "What am I supposed to do for a whole hour of silence?" Elias always gave the same answer. Nothing. That is the entire point. Over the years, certain patients followed his prescription. Not all of them. Most did not. But the ones who did came back changed. A woman named Rosa came to him, burned out and sleepless. She followed the prescription for 30 days. On her next visit, she said, "I made a decision I had been avoiding for 3 years. In the silence on the 14th day, it just arrived." A man named Thomas came to him with chest pains that no test could explain. He followed the prescription for 3 weeks. On his next visit, he said, "I realized on the 9th day that I have been angry at my father for 20 years and never admitted it to myself." A young woman named Priya came to him, exhausted and unable to concentrate. She followed the prescription for 2 weeks. On her next visit, she said something Elias wrote down and kept. She said, "I heard myself think for the first time in years. I did not know I had been missing it." Elias had heard variations of this same thing hundreds of times. The decisions that finally got made, the feelings that finally got named, the desires that finally surfaced after years underwater. All of them arrived in the silence, because they had always been there, waiting.
One afternoon, a patient named Marcus sat across from Elias. Marcus was a successful man, busy, connected, never still. He had followed the prescription for 40 days, and something had shifted in him that he could not explain. He leaned forward in his chair, and he asked Elias the question that everyone wanted to ask, but never did. He said, "Doctor, what actually happens in the silence?" Elias leaned back in his chair. He had answered this question before. But with Marcus, he took longer than usual. He said, "You live in a world that is constantly speaking to you. Your phone speaks. Your notifications speak. Your television speaks. Other people's opinions speak. Social media speaks. The news speaks. All of it speaking. All of it loudly. All of it competing for the same small space inside your head. And somewhere underneath all of that noise is your own voice. The voice that knows what you actually want. The voice that knows what is actually wrong.
The voice that has been trying to tell you something important for months or years, but you cannot hear it because you never stop talking long enough to listen. In the silence, that voice gets louder. Not immediately, not on the first day or the second, but slowly, the way a sound becomes audible when everything else quiets down. In the silence, you remember what you actually think, what you actually feel, who you actually are. Marcus sat with that for a long time. Then he said, "I think I already knew that." Elias smiled and said, "Yes. Everyone does. They just needed the quiet to remember it."
Here is what this story holds for us today. We live in the noisiest time in human history. Not the loudest, the noisiest. There is a difference. Loud is a sound. Noise is a constant. Noise is the phone that never leaves your hand. The notifications that arrive before you have finished reading the last one. The podcast that plays while you cook. The music that plays while you walk. The television that plays while you eat. All of it filling every available second of quiet. And somewhere inside all of that noise, you have forgotten what your own thoughts sound like. Dr. Elias was not prescribing silence because silence is peaceful. Some people find silence deeply uncomfortable at first. He was prescribing silence because silence is honest. It shows you exactly what you have been avoiding, exactly what you have been covering up with noise, and exactly what you have been too busy to hear yourself say. You do not need an hour to start. You need 5 minutes. 5 minutes with your phone face down and the music off. Just you and the quiet. And whatever arrives in those 5 minutes, listen to it. Because it has been trying to reach you for a very long time. Thank you for being here today. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who never stops. Leave a comment below with one word. I read every single one. Subscribe to Tales Studio Stories for a new wisdom tale every week. Stories that slow you down and remind you that your own voice deserves to be heard. Until next time, find 1 hour of quiet.